He is an old father, trapped in the house he built with his hands, now treated as if he were nothing more than a burden. His daughter-in-law calls him useless, denies him a seat at the table, and strips away every shred of dignity he once had. This is abuse, and it is cruel. If this were your father, would you remain silent? Tell us where you're watching from, like this story if it moved you, and subscribe to join us. In San Antonio's West Side, Texas, mornings inside Don Aurelio Garcia's home no longer sound like family. The refrigerator hums in a tired rhythm, a constant drone that fills the silence where conversation used to live. A window fan clatters against the September heat, its blades uneven, scraping metal against metal with each rotation. The smell of bleach clings to every surface, sharp and chemical, overpowering any memory of the spices that once danced in the air when Rosa was alive. The tiled floor, cool and unforgiving, stretches beneath slippers that have lost their shape, flattened by months of shuffling from room to room with no purpose but to obey. On the counter sits a dented aluminum pot, the same one Rosa used every Sunday to simmer pozole, the broth rich with hominy and pork, seasoned with oregano and lime. She would stand there for hours, stirring, tasting, adjusting, while Aurelio sat at the table reading the paper, and grandchildren played tag around the kitchen chairs. Now, the pot rests upside down on a dish towel, drying in neglect, a monument to meals that will never be cooked again. The burners are cold. The spice rack gathers dust. The kitchen table, once the heart of the house, holds only a single placemat, a glass of water, and a bottle of pills Aurelio no longer understands the names of. Camila enters with sharp, deliberate steps, her heels clicking against the tile like a countdown. Her blouse is flawless, ivory silk with pearl buttons, tailored to perfection. Her perfume arrives before she does, a cloud of jasmine and vanilla that costs more than Aurelio's monthly pension. Her hair is swept into a sleek ponytail, not a strand out of place, her nails painted a deep burgundy that catches the morning light. Against her polished white sneakers, Aurelio's faded blue apron looks like something pulled from a forgotten decade, stained with years of cooking and labor. She does not look at him. She never does. Her gaze sweeps the kitchen, cataloging imperfections, searching for reasons to issue orders. "You'll clean the patio later," she says, her voice clipped and efficient, waving a manicured hand toward the mop leaning against the back door. "The neighbors complained about the leaves. Make sure you sweep the corners too. And the grill. It's disgusting." Her words do not ask. They command. She speaks to him the way one might speak to a hired worker, someone temporary and replaceable, not the man who built this house with his own hands, who laid every tile she now walks across with such confidence. The sting of it sits in Aurelio's chest, a familiar weight, dull and constant like a bruise that never heals. From the living room, the television murmurs financial news. Graphs climb upward on the screen, green arrows pointing toward prosperity. The anchor's voice is smooth and optimistic, discussing market trends and investment strategies. It is the soundtrack of Mateo's success, the world of real estate deals and business lunches and handshakes that sealed fortunes. Aurelio hears it every morning now, a reminder that his son has risen to places he could never reach, places where fathers like him no longer fit. He keeps washing dishes, his hands submerged in water that has gone lukewarm. Each plate is slick with suds, each fork scrubbed clean with a sponge worn thin at the edges. The faucet drips in a steady rhythm, a metronome counting the minutes of his shrinking life. When he turns off the water, the silence that follows is dense and pressing, like walls leaning inward, listening, judging. Once this was a house of family, filled with the chaos of children's voices, Rosa's laughter, the clatter of dominoes on Sunday afternoons. Now, it feels like a stage where he has moved from scene to scene, performing chores written by someone else. Camilla opens the refrigerator, pulling out a container of Greek yogurt, organic and expensive, and a bottle of cold-pressed juice. She eats standing up, scrolling through her phone, her thumb flicking upward with the speed of someone who has mastered efficiency. Behind her, Aurelio finishes the dishes and reaches for a towel, drying each plate slowly, placing them in the cabinet with care. His movements are careful, deliberate, because mistakes are no longer forgiven. The silence itself is a humiliation, as heavy as the chores. It is the silence of a man who has been erased, whose presence is tolerated only if it is useful, invisible, and mute. He does not ask for breakfast. He learned months ago that his plate would be set aside, prepared last, if at all, often taken away before he finished. Camilla muttering something about portion control and wasting food. Through the kitchen window, the morning sun spills across the backyard, illuminating the fig tree that Aurelio planted 20 years ago. It leans against the fence now, its branches heavy with fruit that no one picks. The grass needs mowing. The flower beds Rosa once tended are overgrown with weeds. Aurelio used to care for this yard every weekend, trimming hedges, watering plants, sitting under the fig tree with a cold beer and a sense of accomplishment. Now he is only allowed outside to clean, to scrub, to sweep away evidence of neglect that is not his fault. Camilla finishes her yogurt, tossing the container toward the trash can. It misses, bouncing off the rim and landing on the floor. She does not pick it up. She glances at Aurelio, a flicker of expectation in her eyes, and then walks out, her perfume lingering long after her footsteps fade. Aurelio bends, down slowly, his knees protesting, and retrieves the container. He places it in the trash, wipes the spot on the floor where it landed, and returns the towel to its hook. His reflection catches in the window glass. A man bent and fading, his hair thin and graying, his shoulders curved under the weight of invisible orders. He does not recognize himself anymore. The man who built this house, who raised a family, who worked until his hands bled to give his son a better life, has been reduced to this. A servant in his own home, scrubbing floors and swallowing silence. Before this house, before the tiled floors and the fig tree and the refrigerator that hums its lonely song, there was Eagle Pass and a one-room casita where summers cracked the wood and winters rattled thin windows with wind that slipped through every gap. Aurelio grew up poor but faithful, the youngest of 5 children, sleeping on a mattress shared with his brothers, waking before dawn to help his father haul water from the well. He learned early that work was prayer, that hands were made to build and carry and mend, that dignity came not from what you owned, but from what you gave. At 14, he was already working, pushing a wooden cart along the dusty streets near the Rio Grande, selling corn on the cob slathered with mayonnaise and chili powder, raspados and paper cones, their colors bright as church glass, melting in the heat before customers could finish them. He learned to stretch tortillas when the cupboard was empty, to make beans last 3 days, to smile at customers even when his feet ached and the sun beat down like a hammer. His mother taught him to say thank you, to look people in the eye, to never take charity if you could work instead. He met Rosa at a church dance when he was 19 and she was 17, her dress yellow as a canary, her laugh infectious and unguarded. She worked at a bakery, her hands dusted with flour, her apron streaked with cinnamon and sugar. They courted for 2 years, walking along the river at dusk, sharing tamales wrapped in corn husks, dreaming of a life beyond the casita, beyond Eagle Pass, beyond the edge of what they knew. They married on a Saturday in May, the chapel small and sweltering, the vows spoken in Spanish, simple and true. Mateo was born a year later in a rented room above a butcher shop where the smell of meat clung to the walls. Aurelio held his son for the first time with hands that trembled, calloused and rough, cradling something more fragile and precious than anything he had ever touched. He made a promise that night, whispered into the darkness while Rosa slept, and Mateo breathed softly in his cradle made from an orange crate and a folded blanket. He would give this child everything he never had: security, education, a home that could not be taken away. For 20 years, Aurelio worked. He worked as a day laborer, framing houses in the heat, his back bent under sheets of plywood. He worked nights at a warehouse, stacking boxes until his shoulders burned. He worked weekends fixing cars in a neighbor's driveway, his knuckles scraped and bleeding, oil under his nails that no soap could remove. Rosa worked too, cleaning houses, ironing clothes, baking tres, leches cakes for quinceañeras and weddings, her hands never still, her faith never wavering. They saved every dollar, kept it in a coffee can buried in the closet, adding to it week by week, coin by coin, until the can was heavy and full of hope. They bought the land in San Antonio, a small plot on the west side, nothing fancy, but theirs. Aurelio built the house himself, nail by nail, board by board, learning as he went, making mistakes and fixing them, bleeding onto the wood, embedding his sweat into the foundation. The fig tree was planted the day they moved in, a stick no thicker than a broom handle, a gift from Rosa's mother, who said it would bring shade and sweetness if they were patient. Matteo grew up in that house, his childhood filled with laughter and Sunday dinners, birthday parties in the backyard, fireworks on the 4th of July. Aurelio taught him to ride a bike, to tie his shoes, to say please and thank you, to respect his elders. He pushed him to study, to stay in school when other boys dropped out to work, to believe that education was the bridge to a better life. Matteo was smart, quick with numbers, good with people. He earned scholarships, went to college, studied business and finance, learned to wear suits and speak the language of contracts and investments. When Rosa fell ill, the cancer spreading through her body like fire through dry grass, Aurelio worked twice as hard and prayed 3 times as often. He took her to appointments, held her hand through chemotherapy, cooked the food she could stomach, cleaned her when she was too weak to stand. He sold his truck to pay for medications not covered by insurance. He borrowed money from friends, swallowed his pride, begged God for more time. She died on a Tuesday in March, the fig tree just beginning to bud, the house silent except for Aurelio's weeping. After the funeral, Matteo moved back briefly, his success already evident in his tailored suit and expensive watch. He stayed 2 weeks, handling paperwork, organizing finances, promising to visit often. But life pulled him away. The demands of business, the woman he was dating, the deals that could not wait. Aurelio understood. He had raised his son to succeed, to rise above the casita and the one-room life. He could not resent him for achieving what they had sacrificed so much to build. In his wallet, tucked behind his expired driver's license and a prayer card from Rosa's funeral, there is a photo of Matteo at 6 years old, missing his front tooth, wearing a paper crown from a school play where he played a king. His smile is enormous, unguarded, full of the kind of joy that does not yet know disappointment. The edges of the photo are soft, worn from years of handling. The colors have faded, the whites turned sepia, but to Aurelio it glows with a light that has not dimmed. It is proof that sacrifice was not wasted, that love built something real. He touches that photo on nights when the loneliness presses hardest, when the house feels too big and too empty, when Camilla's words bruise deeper than any chore, even when his plate is taken away half full, even when he is told to stay out of sight when guests arrive, even when he is ordered to scrub floors until his hands bleed, he believes that love might still return. Because a father never stops believing in his child, because hope, even when it is foolish, is the last thing a man can control. The summer heat thickens as August settles over San Antonio like a wet blanket. The air conditioning in the house runs constantly, but Camilla keeps it set to 74 degrees, cool enough for her comfort, warm enough that Aurelio sweats through his undershirt by midday. The electric bill, she says, is already too high. She does not mention the spa appointments, the shopping trips to La Cantera, the dinners at expensive restaurants downtown, where a single meal costs more than Aurelio's weekly groceries. On a Thursday afternoon, when the sun is at its cruelest and the cicadas scream their dry summer song, Camila appears in the doorway of the laundry room. She carries a wooden chair, the same one that used to sit at the kitchen table, now repurposed for her convenience. The laundry room is small and airless, heavy with the smell of bleach and fabric softener, damp towels hanging from a rod near the ceiling. The dryer rumbles, shaking the floor beneath Aurelio's feet. She sets the chair down in the center of the room, its legs scraping against the concrete floor. "Sit down," she orders, her voice flat and businesslike, the same tone she uses when scheduling appointments or directing deliveries. Aurelio, folding a towel, hesitates. He looks at the chair, then at Camila, trying to understand what is happening. She snaps her fingers twice, sharp and impatient, the sound cutting through the hum of the dryer. "I said sit." In her other hand are scissors, gleaming silver under the flickering fluorescent light. Professional hairdressing shears, the kind with long blades and ergonomic handles. She must have bought them recently, he thinks, because he has never seen them before. The sight of them makes his stomach tighten, a cold dread spreading through his chest. He lowers himself into the chair slowly, his palms sweating against his knees. His hair, thin but still neatly combed, is one of the last things he controls. Every morning, he wets it under the faucet, combs it back with the precision of a man who once took pride in his appearance, who once kissed his wife goodbye, with his hair slicked and his shirt pressed. It is not much, but it is his, a small territory of dignity in a house where everything else has been stripped away. Camilla circles him, her movements predatory, her heels clicking against the concrete. She studies his head like a sculptor, considering marble, her lips curled in something that is not quite a smile. "Your hair makes you look dirty," she says, her voice laced with contempt. "No wonder people think this house is falling apart. You walk around looking like a homeless man. It's embarrassing." Aurelio's throat tightens. He wants to speak, to defend himself, but the words stick. The dryer shakes violently, completing its cycle, and then stops, plunging the room into a quieter kind of tension. Camilla raises the scissors close to his ear, so close he can feel the cold metal against his skin. "No," he whispers, the word barely audible, swallowed by the sudden silence. His hands grip the edge of the chair, his knuckles white. Then, finding a strength he did not know he still possessed, he raises his voice, trembling but clear. "No cortes mi cabello." The plea bursts from his chest, raw and desperate, a cry that carries decades of accumulated humiliation, months of swallowed rage, years of bending and breaking and obeying. It is not about vanity. It has never been about vanity. It is about the last thing he owns that has not been taken, controlled, or diminished. It is about dignity. It is about being a man, not a servant, not a burden, not a thing to be managed and corrected and improved upon. Camilla laughs, a sound cold and sharp as the scissors in her hand. "Old men don't get to choose," she says, and before he can move, before he can stand or protest or run, the first lock of hair falls. It drifts past his face, gray and lifeless, landing on the bleach-stained floor like a fragment of something that once mattered, then another, and another. She cuts without care, without skill, hacking at his hair in uneven strokes, the scissors snapping open and closed with mechanical precision. Chunks fall onto his shoulders, into his lap, scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. She works quickly, efficiently, circling him, her breathing steady, her expression focused and detached, as if she is trimming a hedge, not destroying the dignity of the man who built the house she lives in. Aurelio squeezes the rosary in his pocket, the beads smooth and familiar under his fingers. His lips pressed together, tight and bloodless, holding back words that would only bring more humiliation. His eyes burn, tears gathering at the edges, but he refuses to let them fall. He will not cry. He will not give her that satisfaction. The dryer, now silent, seems to hold its breath along with him. When she is done, his hair is chopped short, uneven, exposing his scalp in patches where she cut too close. It looks deliberate, the kind of haircut meant to punish, to shame, to strip away the last vestige of self-respect. She steps back, admiring her work with a satisfied nod, then wipes the scissors on a towel and leaves them on top of the dryer. "There," she says, "much better." She walks out without another word, her heels clicking down the hallway, fading into the rest of the house. Aurelio sits alone in the laundry room, strands of his hair clinging to his shoulders, others scattered across the floor like evidence of a crime. The fluorescent light flickers above him, casting uneven shadows. He lifts a trembling hand to his head, feeling the rough patches, the uneven lengths, the cold exposure of skin where hair used to be. The humiliation is complete. It sits in his chest like a stone, heavy and immovable. He does not move from the chair for a long time, gripping its edges, staring at the hair on the floor, the gray strands mixed with dust and lint, a map of his defeat. The echo of his own cry, "No cortes mi cabello," rings in his ears, a proof of the cruelty he can no longer hide, no longer pretend does not exist. This is not living. This is survival. And even survival, he realizes, has its limits. Sunday arrives with bells from Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, their bronze voices rolling across the west side, calling the faithful to 9 o'clock Mass. The sound carries through open windows, across chain-link fences, over rooftops baked by the relentless Texas sun. Aurelio hears them from his room, the small bedroom at the back of the house that used to be Mateo's, now stripped of posters and trophies, furnished only with a narrow bed, a wooden chair, and a lamp with a frayed cord. He has learned to make himself small, to occupy as little space as possible, to disappear into corners when Camilla's friends visit for wine and gossip. He wakes early, as he always does, his body trained by decades of labor to rise before dawn. But this morning, he moves slower than usual, his hands trembling as he buttons his shirt, his reflection in the small mirror above the dresser showing a stranger. The haircut, now a week old, has not improved with time. It remains jagged and uneven, patches of scalp visible where Camilla cut too close, other sections left longer in careless tufts. He has tried to comb it into something presentable, but there is no hiding the brutality of what was done. In desperation, he finds an old baseball cap, navy blue with a faded Spurs logo, and pulls it low over his forehead, hoping it will be enough. Mateo arrives at 10:30, his silver BMW pulling into the driveway with the quiet hum of German engineering. He steps out carrying a white paper bag from La Panaderia, the smell of fresh pan dulce drifting through the air, conchas and cuernos still warm from the oven. Guilt shades his smile, the kind of guilt that comes from knowing you have stayed away too long, that you have let weeks become months, that phone calls and text messages are poor substitutes for presence. He has been busy, he tells himself, closing deals on commercial properties, negotiating contracts, building the empire his father sacrificed everything to make possible. But today, standing in the driveway of the house his father built, he feels the weight of his absence like a hand pressing on his chest. Camilla greets him at the door with practiced sweetness, her voice bright and musical, her arms open for an embrace. She wears a crisp white blouse, linen pants, and sandals that cost more than most people's car payments. Her hair is freshly styled, her makeup flawless, her smile wide and welcoming. The kitchen behind her is spotless, the counters gleaming, a bowl of fresh fruit arranged artfully on the table, oranges and apples stacked in a pyramid that looks magazine-ready. She has swept the floors, hidden the mop and bucket, removed every trace of the cruelty that happens when no one is watching. "Mateo, mi amor, you look so handsome," she says, kissing his cheek, taking the bag of bread from his hands. "Your father will be so happy to see you. He's been asking about you all week." The lie comes easily, smoothly, wrapped in affection. Mateo smiles, wanting to believe, needing to believe that everything here is fine, that his father is cared for, that the woman he married is the same woman who charmed him with her intelligence and ambition. Aurelio emerges from the back of the house, moving slowly, the cap pulled low, his eyes downcast. He wears his cleanest shirt, the one he saves for church, pressed with care, tucked into pants held up by a belt worn thin. Mateo's face brightens at the sight of him, crossing the room with arms extended, ready to embrace the man who gave him everything. "Dad, it's good to see you. I brought your favorites, the ones with the sugar on top." But as Mateo moves closer, something shifts. The cap sits awkwardly on Aurelio's head, tilted at an unnatural angle, too low in the front, as if hiding something. Mateo reaches out, his hand gentle on his father's shoulder, and the cap shifts, sliding back slightly, revealing the truth beneath. Hair chopped short, uneven as if done by malice, not care. Patches of exposed scalp, cuts that could only be deliberate. Mateo stops, his breath catching, his heart freezing mid-beat. The room seems to tilt. The bright kitchen suddenly too bright, too perfect, too false. "Dad," he says, his voice cracking against the silence, "what happened to your hair?" Aurelio's hand flies to the cap, trying to pull it back down, but it is too late. The evidence is exposed. His eyes fill with shame, his mouth opening but no words coming out. Only a choked sound that might be an apology or a plea. Mateo's hands shake as he gently removes the cap completely, revealing the full extent of the damage. This was not a trim. This was not a mistake. This was punishment. Camilla rushes in, her voice quick and defensive, words tumbling out in a rehearsed stream. "He asked me to cut it, Mateo. He said it was too hot, that it was bothering him in the heat. I tried to talk him out of it, but you know how stubborn he can be. It was his idea, I swear. I just did what he wanted." But the lie is too thin, too desperate. Mateo's eyes move to the floor, where strands of gray hair still cling to the grout between tiles in the laundry room doorway, overlooked in Camilla's hurried cleaning. He walks slowly to the laundry room, pushing the door open, and sees more hair scattered across the concrete floor, the wooden chair still sitting in the center of the room, the scissors gleaming on top of the dryer, their blades still carrying a few gray strands. The smell of bleach is overwhelming, as if she tried to wash away the evidence but ran out of time. He turns back to his father, who stands in the kitchen with his shoulders curved inward, unable to speak, his silence more damning than any accusation. This is not the posture of a man who asked for a haircut. This is the posture of a man who has been broken, humiliated, reduced to something less than human. Matteo feels rage and sorrow meet in his chest, colliding like storm fronts, building into something he can barely contain. At that moment, Luz appears from the hallway. Luz Moreno, the housekeeper who comes twice a week, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and calloused hands, a widow who cleans houses to support her grandchildren. She has been silent for too long, complicit through fear of losing work she desperately needs, but she cannot remain silent anymore. Her eyes brim with tears, but her voice does not shake when she speaks. "Señor Matteo," she says quietly, stepping forward, her hands clasped in front of her. He begged her not to. "I was in the hallway, folding sheets, and I heard everything." He said, "No cortes mi cabello." He said it more than once. She laughed at him. She told him old men don't get to choose. Then she cut it anyway, like she was punishing him for something. The words sliced through the kitchen like a blade, cutting through Camilla's excuses, through the false sweetness, through the carefully arranged fruit and spotless counters. The truth, once spoken, cannot be unspoken. Matteo looks at his father, sees the humiliation in his posture, the broken dignity in his uneven hair, the trembling in his hands. He sees the man who built this house, who worked until his body gave out, who sacrificed every comfort so his son could have a better life, now reduced to this. A servant in his own home, abused by the woman Matteo brought into their lives. Rage and sorrow meet in his chest, but he stays steady. He cannot undo what has been done. He cannot erase the months of cruelty, the accumulated humiliations, the loneliness his father has endured while he was busy building his career. But he can act now. He can stop this. Justice must begin here, in this kitchen, on this Sunday morning, with the bells of Our Lady of Guadalupe still ringing in the distance. This is the moment he cannot ignore. That evening, as the sun begins its descent and the heat softens into something more bearable, Matteo transforms the living room into a place of truth. He moves deliberately, methodically, arranging chairs in a semicircle facing the couch where Camilla will sit. The ceiling fan spins overhead, its blades cutting through the heavy air, the only sound in a house that has learned to hold its breath. He has made phone calls, sent text messages, knocked on doors. What is about to happen must be witnessed, must be documented, must be undeniable. Doña Yvette arrives first, the neighbor from next door, a woman in her 70s with silver hair pulled back in a bun, wearing a floral dress and sensible shoes. She has lived on this block for 40 years, raised 6 children in the house she shares with her husband, watched Aurelio build this home board by board. She carries a rosary in her pocket and a sharpness in her eyes that comes from seeing too much to stay silent. She sits in one of the chairs Matteo has arranged, her hands folded in her lap, her jaw set. Jorge Salinas comes next, from across the street, a man in his 50s who works construction, his forearms thick and scarred, his handshake firm. He has borrowed tools from Aurelio, shared beers on summer evenings when Rosa was still alive, watched with growing concern as the old man's movements became slower, more hesitant, more fearful. He nods at Matteo, takes his seat, says nothing. His presence is enough. Luz sits near the window, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes red from crying, but her resolve unshaken. She has cleaned this house for 2 years, watched the transformation from home to prison, seen things she tried to ignore because she needed the work. But there are some things that cannot be ignored, some cruelties that demand testimony. She has her own father to think about, an old man in Laredo who depends on her, and she knows that silence is a kind of betrayal. Aurelio sits in the corner, away from the center, his cap back on his head, covering the shame that has been carved into his skull. Matteo has tried to get him to sit closer, to take a place of honor, but Aurelio has spent too many months making himself small. He cannot simply expand again, cannot simply reclaim space he has been trained to surrender. But he is here. That is enough for now. Camilla enters at 6 o'clock, her confidence sharp and intact, her heels clicking against the tile with the authority of someone who believes she still controls the narrative. She wears a black sleeveless dress, tasteful jewelry, her hair swept to one side, her makeup perfect. But when she steps into the living room and sees the chairs arranged like a courtroom, sees the neighbors sitting with expressions of stone, sees Luz by the window and Mateo standing in the center with a folder of papers in his hands, her confidence flickers. Just for a moment. Just long enough to betray her. "What is this?" she asks, her voice still smooth, but edged with something that might be fear. She looks at Mateo, trying to read his face, trying to find the man she married, the man she learned to manipulate with tears and affection and carefully timed apologies. But that man is not here. The man standing before her is someone new, someone harder, someone she does not recognize. "Sit down, Camilla," Mateo says, his voice calm, almost gentle, but with a finality that allows no argument. She hesitates, glancing at the door, calculating whether she can leave, whether she can deflect, whether she can turn this around with charm or outrage. But the neighbors are watching. Luz is watching. Aurelio, in his corner, is watching. She sits on the couch, her back straight, her hands in her lap, her face a mask of controlled indignation. Mateo opens the folder. Inside are photographs, taken secretly over the past 2 weeks by a private investigator he hired after his last visit, left him with nagging doubts. Photographs of Aurelio scrubbing the patio in 95-degree heat, his shirt soaked through with sweat, his hands wrapped in rags because the bristles of the brush tore open old calluses. Photographs of his meals, portions half the size of Camilla's, sometimes eaten standing up in the kitchen, sometimes not eaten at all. Photographs of the laundry room, the wooden chair, the scissors, the hair still scattered on the floor days after the cutting. Mateo places the photographs on the coffee table, one by one, like laying down evidence in a trial. He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. The images speak louder than any accusation. "This is my father," he says, pointing to a photograph of Aurelio bent over the patio, his face contorted with exhaustion. "The man who built this house. The man who raised me, the man you have been treating like a servant." Camilla opens her mouth to protest, but Mateo raises a hand, silencing her. "I'm not finished." He turns to Luz. "Tell them what you heard." Luz takes a breath, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I heard him beg her not to cut his hair. He said, 'No cortes mi cabello.'" He said it clearly, desperately. She laughed and told him he didn't get to choose. Then she cut it anyway, badly, on purpose, to humiliate him. She looks directly at Camilla, her eyes hard. "I saw you take his medications and hide them in your purse. I saw you throw away his dinner because you said he was eating too much. I heard you tell him to stay in his room when your friends came over because he was an embarrassment." Doña Yvette leans forward, her voice sharp and clear. "I heard shouting, through the walls. I heard you call him dead weight. I heard you tell him he should be in a nursing home, that he was ruining your life. I wanted to knock on the door, but I thought it wasn't my place. I was wrong. It was my place. We are all responsible for each other." Jorge nods, his voice rough with emotion. "I saw him outside one day, scrubbing the patio until his hands bled. It was over 100 degrees. I brought him water, and he looked at me like he was afraid I'd get him in trouble. A man shouldn't be afraid in his own home. That's not right. That's not how we treat our elders." Camilla's mask begins to crack. She shifts from charm to indignation, her voice rising, her hands gesturing. "You don't understand. He's difficult. He doesn't listen. I've been taking care of him. And this is how you repay me? By invading my privacy, by turning people against me? Mateo, you know me. You know I wouldn't—" "I have your emails," Mateo interrupts, his voice cutting through her protest like a knife. He pulls out printed pages, dozens of them, correspondence between Camilla and a nursing home in Careville, inquiries about long-term care, discussions about costs and availability. "You were planning to send him away without his consent, without even telling me. You were going to take control of his finances, sell this house, and put him in a facility against his will." The room goes silent except for the ceiling fan, its blades turning in steady rhythm. Camilla's face drains of color. She has no more words, no more excuses, no more carefully constructed lies. The truth sits in the center of the room like something alive and undeniable. Mateo places a new set of documents on the table, legal papers, stamped and notarized. "This ends today," he says, his voice firm but calm. I've transferred the house into a trust that guarantees my father the right to live here for the rest of his life. You have no claim to it. I've revoked the power of attorney you convinced him to sign. I've filed a protective order. You are no longer welcome in this house." He stands looking down at her. This woman he married, this woman he thought he knew, this woman who transformed into someone capable of cruelty he could never have imagined. "Pack your things. You're leaving tonight." For a moment, Camilla does not move. Then rage breaks through, raw and ugly. She stands, her voice shrill. "You can't do this. This is my home too. I've given up everything for this family, and you're going to throw me out based on lies from hired help and nosy neighbors?" But no one responds. No one argues. The evidence is overwhelming, the testimony consistent, the cruelty documented. Mateo walks to the front door and opens it, the evening air flowing in, warm but fresher than the air inside. "Go," he says simply. Camilla storms to the bedroom, her heels pounding against the floor, and returns 20 minutes later, dragging 2 suitcases, her face contorted with fury and humiliation. She stops at the door, looking back at Mateo, at the neighbors, at Luz, and finally at Aurelio, still sitting in his corner, still wearing his cap, still silent. She opens her mouth as if to speak, but no words come. What can she say that would matter now? The gate slams behind her, her car engine roars to life, and the taillights disappear down the street. For the first time in months, the house seems to breathe again. The fan spins overhead, the same as before, but the air feels lighter, cleaner, as if something poisonous has been expelled. Aurelio sits with his uneven hair hidden beneath his cap, but in the silence there is something new, the beginning of dignity restored. Mateo crosses the room and kneels beside his father, taking his hand, rough and calloused and still trembling. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispers. "I should have seen it sooner." Aurelio squeezes his son's hand, his voice barely audible. "You're here now. That's what matters." The following week, at St. Cecilia's Parish Hall on El Paso Street, the story comes to light, not through gossip whispered in pews or rumors passed over fences, but through testimony given in daylight, with witnesses and documentation and the weight of law behind it. The community gathering happens on a Thursday evening, the hall filled with folding chairs and the smell of coffee brewing in industrial urns. Parishioners arriving in clusters, drawn by word that something important will be discussed. Officer Miguel Delgado from Adult Protective Services stands at the front of the room, a man in his 40s with graying temples and the steady presence of someone who has seen too much suffering and refuses to become numb to it. He wears civilian clothes, a button-down shirt, and khakis, not a uniform, because this is not an arrest. This is education. This is prevention. This is a community learning to protect its own. He begins by explaining elder abuse laws in Texas, speaking in both English and Spanish, his voice clear and unhurried. He describes the different forms abuse can take: physical, emotional, financial, neglect. He explains that elder abuse is not always visible, that it happens behind closed doors, in homes that look perfect from the outside, in families that seem successful and functional. He describes warning signs, unexplained injuries, sudden changes in financial situations, isolation from friends and community, fear or anxiety in the presence of caregivers, changes in appearance or hygiene. Then, without naming names, without pointing fingers, he describes a recent case, a widowed father living in his own home, the home he built with his own hands, a daughter-in-law who gradually took control, isolating him, forcing him to perform excessive chores in dangerous heat, withholding proper meals, humiliating him with forced grooming that was not about care but about control. He describes medications hidden, finances manipulated, plans to move the elderly man to a facility against his will. He describes a haircut administered not with scissors but with cruelty, a deliberate act of humiliation designed to strip away dignity. The room is silent. People shift in their seats. Some nod in recognition, having seen or suspected similar situations in their own neighborhoods, in their own families. Doña Yvette sits in the third row, her rosary beads clicking softly. Jorge Salinas sits near the back, his arms crossed, his jaw tight. Everyone knows which case Officer Delgado is describing. Everyone knows who he is talking about. The absence of names makes it more powerful, not less, because it could be any family, any home, any elder in this community. Officer Delgado explains the legal consequences of elder abuse in Texas: criminal charges, including assault, theft, and exploitation; civil penalties, including restitution and restraining orders; mandatory reporting requirements for healthcare workers, social workers, and law enforcement. He emphasizes that abuse is not a private family matter, but a crime, and that communities have both the right and the responsibility to intervene. When he finishes, the room erupts in quiet conversation, neighbors turning to neighbors, sharing concerns, asking questions, some admitting they suspected something in their own families, but did not know how to act. Officer Delgado stays for an hour afterward, handing out pamphlets and business cards, listening to stories, taking notes, promising follow-up. Camilla's name is never spoken aloud in the parish hall, but it does not need to be. Within days, the community knows, not through cruelty or gossip, but through the simple machinery of truth. She is no longer welcome at the boutiques where she shopped, the restaurants where she dined, the social clubs where she once networked. Her name is removed from invitation lists, her calls go unreturned, her social media presence quietly blocked by people who once envied her lifestyle. The punishment is not violent, it is not dramatic, it is the slow, inevitable consequence of being known for what she truly is. The legal consequences are more formal and more severe. Mateo, working with an attorney from the Texas Elder Abuse Coalition, files charges. The bank accounts Camilla accessed are frozen and audited, revealing unauthorized withdrawals totaling over $40,000. Money meant for Aurelio's medical care and living expenses, spent instead on shopping trips, spa treatments, and vacations. The nursing home correspondence is entered as evidence of attempted exploitation and unlawful restraint. Photographs, witness testimony, medical records documenting malnutrition and dehydration, all compiled into a case that leaves no room for doubt. Camilla is barred from the home by court order, prohibited from contact with Aurelio, named in legal papers that become public record. She hires lawyers, tries to mount a defense, claims misunderstanding and exaggeration, but the evidence is overwhelming. The investigation continues, charges are filed, and she faces the very real possibility of criminal conviction, fines, and even imprisonment. Her career in real estate consulting evaporates, clients unwilling to associate with someone facing elder abuse charges. Her reputation, carefully constructed over years, collapses in weeks. At home, Aurelio sits at the kitchen table on a Saturday morning, sunlight streaming through the window, warming the tiles that were once cold under his feet. A barber from the parish, a man named Carlos, who learned his trade in his father's shop, and now volunteers his skills for those who cannot afford regular haircuts, has come to the house. He works with gentle care, his scissors precise, his touch respectful, evening out the damage Camilla inflicted, restoring some semblance of dignity to Aurelio's appearance. The hair is short now, shorter than Aurelio wore it in his younger years, but it is even, clean, purposeful. When Carlos finishes, he hands Aurelio a mirror, and for the first time in weeks, Aurelio sees himself as something more than a victim. On the wall of the living room, Mateo has hung a new photograph, professionally framed, taken just days ago. It shows father and son together under the fig tree in the backyard, its branches heavy with fruit, the evening light golden and forgiving. Aurelio's smile in the photograph is faint but real, the smile of a man beginning to remember what safety feels like. Mateo's arm is around his father's shoulders, protective and present. The photograph replaces the old family portrait that included Camilla, now packed away in a box in the garage, a relic of a mistake that will not be repeated. The scissors that once mocked him are gone, thrown away with finality, replaced by nothing because there is no need for replacement. Aurelio's hair is his own again, to comb or cut as he pleases, a small sovereignty restored. The wooden chair from the laundry room has been moved back to the kitchen table, returned to its proper purpose, a place to sit for meals, not for punishment. Mateo has moved back home, not permanently, but for now, long enough to ensure his father's safety, to rebuild trust, to make amends for the months he was absent. He has hired Luz full-time, not as a housekeeper, but as a companion and assistant, someone who will ensure Aurelio is never isolated again, never left vulnerable to anyone's cruelty. Doña Yvette checks in daily, bringing food, offering conversation, sitting with Aurelio when Mateo is at work. Jorge stops by on weekends, helping with repairs around the house, the fig tree, the fence that needs mending. One evening, as the sun sets and the cicadas begin their nightly chorus, Mateo sits across from his father at the kitchen table. Between them is a simple dinner: chicken soup with rice, warm tortillas, a bowl of sliced mango. They eat in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that does not press or accuse but simply exists, shared between two people who have found their way back to each other. "I should have protected you sooner," Mateo says softly, setting down his spoon, looking at his father with eyes that carry both regret and resolve. Aurelio reaches across the table, placing his rough, calloused hand over his son's. "You protected me when it mattered," he replies, his voice steady, stronger than it has been in months. "You came back. That's what matters." The kitchen hums with peace now, no longer with fear. The refrigerator's tired rhythm sounds almost musical. The fan clatters, but it is a familiar sound, not oppressive. Outside, children's laughter rides the evenings, air spilling over from a neighbor's yard. Justice has been done, not with violence, not with vengeance, but with truth, law, and love. Aurelio breathes deeply, no longer hiding behind silence, no longer shrinking into corners, no longer afraid. He looks at his son, at the man he raised, the man who came back for him, and feels something he has not felt in a long time: pride. Not pride in what he has done, but pride in what has been done for him, in being worth fighting for, in being worth saving. His words, when they come, settle into the heart of the kitchen, into the walls that have witnessed both cruelty and redemption, into the air that now carries hope instead of fear. "Respect is the last gift a father deserves," he says quietly, his voice carrying the weight of years. "And the first one no son should ever forget." Mateo nods, squeezing his father's hand, and in that moment, the house that Aurelio built with his own hands becomes a home again,